2. We're live. There we go. Hello and welcome everybody to 40K Frontiers Showcase. With us today we've got the beautiful, the wonderful, the ever great Steve Joll. How you doing, buddy?
No one in the history of the world has ever referred to me as beautiful or ever great, to be fair. So I'll take both of those. Thanks very much.
And we have the amazing Towse. How you doing, buddy? You muted yourself.
You muted yourself again, Alex.
Oh, cool. I'm doing so good. So, Sam's come in and cut off my intro, and, I was going to do a bit, so I'm just going to go with a bit. So today with us, he's world famous in New Zealand as a radio host. He is world famous in the 40K scene for hosting the wonderfully successful 40K Game Changers. He has co-hosted the Art of War podcast. He will soon be the host of the 40K Champions podcast. He, alongside his friends Sean Sullivan and Aaron Wilson, is taking over from the venerable Pete Dunn, and he's revitalizing the Wellington 40K scene. He has won many Best Painted. He's done so with his beloved Space Wolves, and more recently with his fantastic Imperial Knights. He is laughing, as he's usually on the other side of these introductions. It's the wonderful Steve Joll.
Oh my God, that's 100% true. Is that what it feels like? Wow.
I didn't even do any research. I thought about it, but I was like, no, I know a little bit of stuff. We'll go with this.
Yeah. So allow me to do what almost everybody I introduce does and correct you on one minor point. Which is I haven't won many Best Painted. I've won 2, and they're both with the Knights Army. The Space Wolves.
You won Best Painted at Not Masters, didn't you?
No, I might have.
No?
I might have. No, I didn't. If I did, I don't have the trophy for it. So I might have got like a second or a third or something, but I didn't. I didn't win.
I have a funny feeling like maybe you would the winner but didn't want to give it to yourself, so gave it to I'm blanking on him with his demons.
Sam Witt.
Yeah.
No,
I think it was you two competing.
Yeah. Well, we can argue about it if you want. I'm pretty sure.
No, it's fine. I didn't do any research. I'm just like, the Space Wolves are so good. I'm confident you won a Best Painted with them as well.
Well, the problem with the Space Wolves, some of them I really love, but I've owned them. I've been playing Space Wolves for long enough, and everybody who's been playing an army for a while will know. I've got probably 3 different paint schemes, which are all because I painted them for a while just in the standard Space Wolf scheme, and I was like, this is cool and everything. But then I saw something else, and I was like, oh, I want to do that. So I painted heaps of models in that scheme, and then I realized, as great as it looks, it's really high maintenance. So then I started painting yet another scheme, and the idea was to go back and paint all of my other stuff in that same scheme. But laziness has won out. And so I just, whenever I put my army, Space Wolves army down, there's at least 3 different paint schemes.
Yeah. Is the cross-hatching one the high maintenance one?
Yes. Yeah. I really love the cross-hatching, but it's, oh my God, it takes so long. It looks amazing on the bigger models as well, but it just takes, when you want to paint. And that's with a Space Marine army. Imagine if you had to do something high maintenance for, a million Termagaunts or whatever.
So that's where you made the wonderful choice of going to the Knights.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and the fact that I'm old and I've got a bad back and bad knees and short attention span. I don't want to, mock Alzheimer's or anything, but my brain works in a way that if the game goes too long, I start to forget what the plan was at the start of the game. So having 7 models to move around, it just kind of works for me on every level.
Outstanding.
More than completely fair. But as Cass alluded to, so if you've listened to a 40K podcast, I'm sure you've actually listened to Steve one way or the other for all his various avenues and ventures. So, but for anyone who isn't aware of maybe the first time listening, so Steve, I guess, introduce yourself. So how did you actually get into 40K? So I'm sure you've shared your story multiple times, but how did you actually get into 40K yourself?
My son got me into it accidentally. So I was at a movie with him and a friend of his, and his birthday was coming up. And as we left the cinema complex in Wellington, this is a while back pre-earthquake, there was Reading Cinemas Complex had a Warhammer store in Reading's complex. And so as we're coming down the escalator, my son said, oh, can we go in there? And I went, oh, God, okay. And we walked in, and as soon as I walked in, I was like, hey, wait, this is cool. What are these things? And shout out to Nathan, who was working who still works in the Warhammer store, but was in there at the time. And just kind of talked me through it, and I was just fell in love with the aesthetic of it, the models, and kind of bought some to paint and fell in love with painting them, and then got into playing, and that was the greatest thing ever. So yeah. that's the Reader's Digest condensed version. But my son got me into it, and then ironically he stopped playing or stopped being interested at all.
That's excellent, because that's like the exact same story as me. Like literally the same escalator, the same cinema, in the same store.
Yeah, right. So
Yeah.
it was a really cool store, and it's where they are now in Wellington is really cool as well. I really love their new location, and it's a great team. Nathan and Will have been in there forever, and but just for the first thing was the aesthetic of it, just seeing the models and thinking how freaking cool they were, and I honestly thought, because I'm a bit artsy fartsy in a previous life, and I thought the painting would be it. I thought this is a great way to paint and kind of zone in on that. Not to drag it down, depressing backstory. My brother took his own life a bunch of years ago. So this was a way for me. I kind of spiraled downwards. And so this just painting models, I found it to be a great way for me to just forget everything else, zone in on that and just do that for a bit. But then when I discovered playing, I feel like for me, I now paint to play rather than the other way around.
Yeah.
Oh.
It's
fantastic.
No, and that is a sad story, but like 40K is great, and that there's a number of like great stories of it helping people with mental health and stuff.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's
100%.
I don't know if I've said that much, but like the whole me starting a tournament scene was a little bit similar, in that I took a break from uni for mental health stuff, and then it was a perfect project to get back into, being productive, and then because I had the time to do it, and now I'm back mostly on track. So yeah, there's like a whole bunch of excellent it's a great scene. And there's also, like, within New Zealand, to go on a bit of a tangent, there's a wonderful drive. I can't remember when it is every year, but like the whole community paints up a wonderful army that'll get auctioned off. Yeah, you probably are a little bit more familiar and will have painted something, I'm sure, Steve, for that.
Do you know what? To my shame, I haven't painted anything for it yet. A bunch of people have. The first time around they did Black Templars. I believe that's happening right now. That it's in the selling the army process. It's this year they put it up on eBay rather than our local Trade Me option. So Sam, I don't know if you we have the New Zealand version of eBay, which is called Trade Me. Last year they sold the army on Trade Me, and I can't remember how much they made. But Rick Williams is the guy that runs it. So shout out to Rick as well. What a great dude he is for putting it all together, and everybody that's painted something for it. I know lots of people have, and they collect. They do one, like Black Templars was the first one. Lots of people paint different models. They collect it all up, and then they auction the army off, and the money goes to mental health.
Oh, well, fantastic initiative. That's fantastic. It's amazing. It's like we always raise funds for good things, and look, someone gets an army out of it, right? Which is even better.
Yeah.
People aren't passionate about painting like yourself. So and I understand. So Steve, you've collected a lot of armies over the time span. Like I know you've talked about on Canhammer a couple of times. The times you hosted that buying and selling. So starting off with Towse and Richard Siegler, coaching along the way, then Black Templars, Nids. But right now, so you have Space Wolves and Imperial Knights. Is there any other armies you collect or have collected?
I've collected far too many, because I actually haven't been in the game that long, like a few years, but most people have been in the game longer than me. But it just took me a while to find my groove with the armies. I just love the aesthetic of Wolves. I really love Templars. They were the first love. And then I got into Tau for a little while, but and again, I love the aesthetic of it, but I just can't get my brain to work with playing them properly. I'm very much I love the charge and assault phases. So Space Wolves are a kind of a natural fit. Knights probably less so, but there are great ways to, like, you kind of get everything with them. You can kind of, you can tailor an army so that it is more heavily into the assault phase. Although the reason I love Knights is just because you can make them survivable in the game, which I think is really important at the moment. So in terms of other armies I've collected, Drukari for a little while. I collected the pointy ears.
Yeah.
I collected Necrons for a little while. I collected Admech for about a minute and a half before selling them to my friend Aaron. Or we swapped, actually. He had some Necrons and I had some Admech, and we just kind of said, we'll swap around. You can have my Admech stuff. So I've collected a heap of armies. The only things I haven't collected are CSM, because I did have a Demons army for a while, which I really love painting, but again, just had trouble making it work on the table. So CSM and Eldar I haven't done and have no interest in doing.
You've got some coconut crab Tyranids as well, right? Did that get?
I did have, yeah, kind of
Yeah.
coconut crab. I used the coconut crab as my inspiration,
Yeah.
and did my own. It was kind of a yellow and black, like lots of little dots, and yeah, you painted. That was a great example of I painted the big ones, and then looked at the million gaunts and went, "Oh, stuff that. I'm not doing this on those models," and so I just sold the whole lot. And then I did the similar thing with Necrons. I got this Necron army more recently, and started painting them, and they were going to be my display army. Like that was like these guys I thought looked really, really cool, very dramatic. And again, I kind of painted the bigger stuff and got through the Silent King, which took so long, and then just looked at all the troops that I was going to have to paint, like 20, 40 warriors, whatever it was. Looked at the troops and went, oh, just don't think I can do this on all of that, and sold them. So. And this was by now, when I paint up half an army and then sell it, Aaron, who you've already mentioned, Aaron and Sean from the other Properly Cock guys, man, they give me shit. They just give me such a hard time. They're like, because Necrons would just get like the Necrons, the book, sorry, not the book, but the update had just dropped, and Necrons were suddenly super, super good. And I said, I'm selling my Necrons army. And they're like, why would you do that, you idiot?
Why wasn't Sean just like, yeah, I'll have that. Cheers.
Yeah. Well,
it'd be a problem. For him, it'd be a problem, right? Because it's like, oh, now I've got these wonderful, like, Steve painted Necrons, and now look at mine over there. Just like,
Well, that's very generous. His look really good, but the issue, one of the things was because we were gearing up for the teams event, right? And kind of the plan is to play more teams events. So Sean was taking Necrons, and I'm very much the worst player in the team. So I kind of like, you guys choose what you want, and I'll just take my two options are Knights or Wolves or Necrons. But Sean had already taken those. So I was like, look, if I'm not going to get to play them over the next few months when they're good, by the time I do get to play them, they'll be garbage again. And I'm not very good at playing with them anyway. So why don't I just sell them? I had fallen in love with Knights by then. I had a Knight model, and I got given a Knight model, and then started painting it up, and the scheme seemed to be really, really cool. And I had a couple of practice games. I thought, no, this is it. I love these guys. I love the lore. I love the painting. I love the playing. Everything about Knights is me. I love them so much.
Yeah.
As long as you enjoy it, right? And like when you love it, you get like more time on the tabletop. You invest more time painting and stuff like that. In the we have Tim asking. So, Steve, have you converted to the Church of Slap Chop? So I'm sure the painting craze of dry brushing grey and white, and then contrast paint, and away we go.
Yeah. Well, when I had my demons, I bought this demon army, and then at that point, contrast was launched, like at about the same time, and so I took. I want to say 50 plague bearers, and just painted them all contrast, and figured out a way to get a really cool effect with the green and then contrast yellow, and then the really dark color. And it's like you just kind of the way I made it all work. It worked really, really well. And then the blood red kind of stuff for the guts spilling out, the screamer pink and the red. So you. Not exactly slap chop, but that's the way I painted a lot of my Space Wolf, just the standard Marine army. At first is literally the blue, slap over the agrax, and then just dry brush progressively lighter shades of blue over the top of it.
Yeah.
And that, look, it works. It looks good. And 99% of the time, you're just wanting to get models on the table so you can play a game, right?
Yeah. good from far, far from good is my go-to description of painting.
Yeah.
I am
Yeah.
capable of painting things nicely, but I'm not capable of focusing myself to do that much. So,
Right.
yeah, we'll get there.
Play nights, dude. It's
I
like
do.
one model. And you can, yeah, that's right, you do, of course. I'm an
Yeah,
idiot.
yeah.
No, and play them really, 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 really well, like way better than I do. So.
Oh yeah, I went 3-3 so hard at the Kraken GT. But yeah, it's all right.
What happened on day 2?
Day 2. Finn didn't fail saves on Scarbrand. It just decided, nah, it's not going to happen. I got to activate with a Slaughterclaw Knight 4 times into Scarbrand. He took 2 damage from an auto explode.
Oh boy.
So it's just like, I don't feel bad about this. I have made reasonable decisions. Finn has decided Scarbrand shall not fail a save, or if he does, it will CP reroll into not a failed save. And like, sometimes that happens with Knights, right? Like, so yeah.
Yeah. Finn's such a lovely guy, but I've never had to play against him, and I can't imagine how awful that would be. I know that when we were at the teams event, pretty much every single round, about 10 minutes into the round, maybe 15, Finn was walking around having finished his games. He's like, he's there for a good time, not a long time, right? Throw it all in, done.
Yeah. And so for teams, were you the Knights put up, the classic go first, put Knights on the light table? Is that the
kind of, yeah. So the big armies I didn't want to play were other Knights and Towse. So that was obviously 4 out of 5 of my games were other Knights and Towse. So,
that's right. You got bust, didn't you?
I got bust a couple of times.
Oh dear.
But to be fair, like that's kind of one of the reasons. I'm, like I said, very, very happy owning the fact that, in our team, I'm the least accomplished player. So look, what you got to do, you got to do.
I do remember at the end, someone was running around at pairings being like, guys, be nice to Steve. Everyone vote for Steve for painted because we've been busting him all weekend.
Yeah. My last game was against Space Wolves, against Mr. England with his Wolves. So that was fun. That was a really fun game.
Nice.
Oh, too good. So you've mentioned there a couple of times, so Aaron and Sean, who former team properly cocked. Yeah. So Steve, who is properly cocked? So my understanding, as Towse alluded to, there was a long-time TO that hosted tournaments around Wellington, and yourselves and your team have sort of taking over those tournaments and trying to like re-energize the scene and take part. So tell us about Properly Cocked and what the team's about.
All right. Well, Properly Cocked actually started off being a podcast that lasted for a couple of months. And that was Sean Sullivan, Aaron Wilson, myself, and a guy named Brendan D was heavily involved in it as well. And then there was a teams event in Auckland that we wanted to go to. So Sean, Aaron, myself, and then a couple of other guys got on board for that teams event. And we went up to Auckland. This was in Wellington. And we won it. So we had the Kraken guys come down and people come from Christchurch and whatever. And we ended up winning that event. And that was hosted by Pete Dunn. And so when the podcast fell over and we kind of competed in a teams event, we thought, well, this will be cool. This will be the basis of our team, and we can call it Properly Cocked. But at the same time in Wellington, 2 things happened. One, Pete Dunn had kind of, look, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but he said as much. He'd kind of had enough, right? It was time to move on. He had been hosting events in Wellington for a very long time. It
was like 20 years or something, right?
20 plus. And by himself, like each event that he was organizing. Yeah. And if you've done it, you know how big a job this is. And like having to rely on people, the community, to step up and help you set up tables is all very well, but it's not always going to happen the way you want it to. So 20 years of doing it by himself, he'd had enough and he stepped down. And at the same time, another guy, Hagen Kerr, who also was organizing 2 or 3 events in Wellington each year, shifted to Christchurch. So those 2 things happen within like a month of each other, and suddenly there's no one in Wellington organizing events. And so we went, well, and this is entirely selfish. The main motivation for us was we want to play at events. Like we want to play. And if there's the only way that we could see that we would be able to do that is if we actually started organizing them. So we did. So Pete had an event called the Masters, which people in New Zealand will be familiar with. You have to qualify to get into the Masters, but he kind of stepped down and then wasn't going to be able to host the Masters event. So the very first event we hosted was the Knot Masters. Pete already had the hall booked, already had some stuff arranged, and we kind of took it over and said, well, look, let's just host a little 20-person thing. We'll call it the Knot Masters, and people can come and play. And we enjoyed doing it, and people seemed to have a good time. So we put on a weird. Do you know what the weird thing is? We looked recently. That was a year ago, and since then we've hosted. It feels like it should be 2 years ago because we've hosted. The next one we did was at the Petone Working Men's Club, and that was great because there's a bar available and there was food available at lunchtime. And that was kind of still during COVID, semi-lockdown times. We were at orange level or whatever it was. So it was a bit more difficult to get a drink and food, but you could do it. And there were limits on how many people we could have and so on. But then after that, we hosted a couple more. So I think we've hosted 3 or 4 two-day events and 2 or 3 singles, one-day events in a year, and it feels like it's been longer. And now we're kind of gearing up for our next event on the 10th and 11th of December, which is again back at the Petone Working Men's Club. So I think the great thing is we're riding on Pete's coattails and Hagen's coattails.
Yeah.
But at the same time, what we want to do is, because we're not just one person doing it by himself, we wanted to take it to that next level as well. And I know that this is also with Alex and guys like him in Christchurch and with the Kraken guys in Auckland. The big thing for me was I wanted to get it out of the little school hall and get it into a venue or close to a venue where people could get a beer and get some food and there was accommodation nearby and all of that sort of stuff. Kind of lift the level of professionalism a little bit because there's 3 of us doing it. But also, take the terrain quality to that next level as well, where you're going, you're not just relying on the community. Pete was able to furnish a bunch of tables, but then had to rely on people to bring stuff. And when you're doing that, you just never quite know what's going to turn up. So we've invested a lot of money and a lot of time in getting 20 tables worth of terrain just between the 3 of us that we can say, okay, we've got that quality, not all exactly the same, but at a similar level of fairness for shooty and combat armies.
Improving on the infamous peak done bicycle helmet, like polystyrene hills.
The hills. I love Pete so much, but those hills were just horrific.
And so for reference, people, Pete had these, they were massive. They were like foot by foot and a half by almost a foot tall, just big polystyrene dome hill things they were a thing.
So you could walk a night up onto the top of them, but if you played Wolves without jump packs, you had to run all the way around the hill. So anytime you came up against an army that had fly, you were like, well, should we just go and get a drink now because this is over? But it was, so being able to have, because the big thing for me, and I'm sure you guys, is the internet exists. And so people are able to watch battle reports and overseas tournament streaming, on War Games Live or Frontline Gaming. We can see the level of, events that are over there now. And so if you were watching that and then going to a school hall with lots of hills, and again, I don't want to sound like I'm shitting on Pete and Hagen because they're doing everything by themselves and just on a budget, trying to get stuff done, get people to events.
Oh, yeah.
And when it worked so well for so long, but then because we felt we had the opportunity, we thought we can just kind of shunt this just up a little bit, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, and to quickly back up Pete, he definitely had some great tables as well. There were just some of them with the hills, and it would be there were a couple of them, and they mostly worked as centerpiece things. Also, that venue was great because there was the cat.
At the school. Yeah.
The school hall that Pete always held the Masters at, and maybe other games. There was a really friendly, I don't know if it was like a school cat, but it would wander around and stuff. It's a school cat. It was excellent. But
yeah. But the other thing about that hall is it's in Kandala, which is oh my God, all due respect to people who live in Kandala, it's a pain in the neck to get to. And
you look at the Google Maps, to the pathing that you need to go. It looks like, the motorway goes right next to it. And then you look and there's 2 kilometers of zigzagging because it's however far up a hill.
And I get lost there. And
Yeah, I'm sorry, apologies. But yeah, like so for context, people. So Wellington, so where Steve lives, is the south of the North Island. So all New Zealand split into two islands. So and Auckland's the very far north of the North Island, and where Alex Towse is the middle point of the South Island. So it's roughly like an 8-hour drive from Auckland to Wellington, if not more, and like an hour and a half, 2-hour flight. So for context, it's not a close trip at all. Despite being a small island and a small nation, it's not easy to get to. And like
we're small. We are small, but it's long, right? So from Wellington to Auckland, as you said, 7 to 8 hour drive, probably 8-hour drive. Down to Christchurch is financially impossible these days because airfares are just ridiculous. That's not true. Obviously, you can go down if you've got far long enough to plan. And I know Alex has come up to Wellington a couple of times, so shout out. That's massive. That meant a lot to us actually when you came. You and John and who else?
I think it was just the two of us for the Not Masters, right?
Right.
And then we ran away with your first and second trophies, and you suddenly needed to give Hagen a bit less flack for doing middlingly in Christchurch. I remember.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we were a bit dark about that. To be fair, you came and won that one, and then the very next one, the guys from Auckland came down, and every single one of them bought 9 Void Weavers, and they came.
That's right.
I think they came first, second, third, and fifth. The 4 different guys with their 9 Void Weavers. So
I'm going to claim my my victory. It's like Steve over here was like, "Oh, it's my first tournament. This is great." And then some ass from Christchurch comes up with his knights and takes the trophy away. And it's like, right, you know what? Knights, this is for me, but I'm going to paint them better as well.
Sure, I'll give that to you. Why not?
So but no, like you guys are doing, it's great. I should really try come up to another Wellington event, but I don't know. Things, airfare, life, you know how it goes.
Yeah. That's it for Sam's reference, and for people listening overseas. Just the cost of things in New Zealand is a bit crazy, and if airfares have gone nuts. I don't know if they have in Aussie and in other countries as well, but just the whole supply and demand thing, inflation, everything. Airfares here are just ludicrously expensive at the moment. So to get around the country to things like Alex has already been, and we have to Auckland to the team's event, to do a trip or 2 each year, sure, but you're not going to be up and down the country for everything that's going on, right?
Yeah, like I think the thing is the scene here is pretty good, right? So you can try and like scrounge accommodation, and also Sean from your crew, because you guys are great. Sean played taxi both the times I was in Wellington for a tournament, so that was awesome. And made it really easy. So
it's good he's doing something. God, he doesn't do much for us.
Is he not holding up his end of the rotation? Because you guys are meant to have the rotation, right? Where like each of the 3 of you TOs one of the events.
Yeah. No, he is. He's very good. He's definitely holding his end of, in terms of TOing, and he's the guy that knows how to use down under pairings. So yeah.
When are you guys going to switch to BCP?
BCP. Well, the Kraken guys have already gone over to BCP. To be honest, I hadn't even thought of it. Like we just DUP is what we use. So, but I definitely can. I mean, like if it's better, or if it works out better, then why not?
I think it's not especially difficult to use. I'm going to say, as a simple Knights player, having worked it out to run my first event, you can manage it. And as Sam said to me when I was deciding what I was going to use to run my event, just use BCP. It's what everyone uses. So
right, okay.
I don't know. New Zealand might finally transition. It might be worth considering the subscription now that there actually are events using it.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And like there's more improved features and best coast pairings, and down on the pairings is eventually going to go away the dodo, and so be like kicked away and like taken out back. So it'll go offline eventually. So you have to finally adapt eventually. You got time though until then, but eventually. So you mentioned there, obviously, like, so it sounds like you've got a really big community, obviously in New Zealand. So Towse has talked about all the interconnection with Auckland and Wellington and stuff like that. Is there other scenes like that you sort of connect with? Like, do you get the chance to interact with the people from Dunedin, like all the way down south, or across other regions and networks, or is it all that Wellington scene you sort of just to connect with those 3 big hubs?
For me personally, it's mostly based around Wellington, but there are an awful lot of people that there's a good scene in kind of the central North Island as well. We quite often get players coming to Wellington from Hawke's Bay and Rotorua and There's a great little scene in Tauranga as well, and even around Hamilton. So there's a scene called an event called Lakes of Blood in Rotorua each year around the lake, and a bunch of people go up for that from Wellington. So around the North Island for sure, and then but that little stretch of water between the islands is deceptively prohibitive. I don't know that. I mean, I feel like there are players in Dunedin that we know that we've met before.
I think the Dunedin scene largely interacts with, like, they'll come up to the Christchurch scene a bit. They have, I think, one main event annually, SouthCon. But yeah, so the North Island's got a whole bunch of the scene going on. South Island, because we've got less population overall, is largely in Christchurch. There's some guys over on the West Coast that they come across, but that's like a handful. But yeah, one thing I will say though is I'm not confident the flights are too outrageous. I haven't checked Wellington. Maybe it's just like terrible into and out of there. But compared to say the US, where I think things have got even more ridiculous, I'm not sure it's too bad. Like, for reference, my trip to the recent event in Auckland, which I booked like 3-ish weeks out or something like that, was 300 New Zealand return. I was fortunate that I managed to, because I had accommodation up there, so I just booked with a few days either side. So it was more if you wanted to hit like the weekend times. So yeah.
300 New Zealand dollars, just doing the conversion for people listening overseas, is about $10.50 US.
Yeah, accurate.
That's definitely what it is. It's more like 200 US, by the way, for people. Like 200, like 190 US. So it's pretty good.
Like
Yeah. I paid for like uprising flights, and it was 500 return from, I think, Sydney to Adelaide or something like that. So it was a lot.
$500 dues, is it?
$500 dues. That's all right though.
Yeah,
the price we pay, right? For
yeah.
But, so obviously you mentioned before also, but it is expensive in New Zealand, and Towse has obviously raged about it before. Do you find that do you find that in scene in New Wellington as well? Like, it's quite expensive to collect 40K for yourself.
It is.
Yeah,
it's like there's no, and the worst thing you can do is go online and which we've all done, but go online and see what the prices are in other countries for the same models. It's like, even with the New Zealand dollar difference but here's the thing. So, and I know a lot of people get into the 3D printing, and I'm happy to say I've spent money on not full models, but 3D printed bits for models. I'm not persecuting anyone who does. You do you, whatever you want to do. But the thing for me is, I'm so grateful to the guys that got me into this hobby, Nathan and Will, the guys at the stores, and Luke in Lower Hutt, where I live. So for reference, Lower Hutt is like just a little bit out of Wellington, but part of the greater Wellington region. So we have a store in the city in Wellington and a store in Lower Hutt. But I'm so grateful to them, and also for, like, you could go in there, you get the free advice, you get the table use for free, and you can just go in whenever you want, play games, you learn tricks on how to paint and how to play, and that's all for nothing. And yes, the models are expensive, and more expensive here than anywhere else in the world. It's official now. The table just came out recently. We were able to see holy crap, we're paying actually literally more. But when I look at it for how much money I pay versus how much time spent, it actually works out like it's not bad. Like, compared to, say, going to a movie, you spend whatever you spend to go to a movie, and you're out 2 hours later. Great. And then you get some time talking about the movie with whoever, but that's it. Versus spend $100 on a box of toys, the amount of time it takes me to build the box of toys, then paint the box of toys, and then usually you get to play that box of toys on the table, usually. I mean, there are lots of people with various boxes still unbuilt and unpainted and unplayed, but you know what I mean? That if you say that I'm going to spend money on a box, I'm going to paint it, build it, paint it, play it, that's a lot of hours. Every one of those nights has found table time and practice games and at tournaments, and it's just, and the enjoyment you get while you're getting them ready, all of that sort of stuff, the mental health aspect that we've already touched on. So you pay a lot, but then every now and then you go, I don't want to have to pay that much to Forge World for lightning locks for my Moirax, so I guess I'll just get a guy who knows a guy to get them for me.
I for sure have used my ability to design things, to design my own lightning locks, to take to use for Moiraxes. So yeah, it was quite validating though to see that at some point GW put out like their expectation for their US Open series or whatever it was, and it's
Right.
like, yeah, we're okay with 3D printing if you've got other models and you've designed the things yourself. And I'm like, yes, I feel vindicated.
There was a
So,
lot
yeah.
of confusion around that when that all first came out, but through the podcast, I'm fortunate that I have contact with a guy named Mike Brandt who kind of runs the whole thing, and I was able to ask him at the time when all this kind of came out, here are our expectations. People misinterpreted a lot of that. They're fine with conversions. They just want your conversions to mostly be GW models and recognizable as the thing it's supposed to be. And in fact, they encourage conversions in a lot of cases for, characters or bigger models or whatever.
They
just
probably
going
have
nuts on
that.
it.
They probably have that thing called a player pack, but nobody reads those. So like, I can understand the confusion, right?
Yeah, if you've ever organized a tournament, you know that nobody reads those.
I know for a fact that some people have read mine because I put somewhere in there down the bottom, if you put this code, I'll accept a lower payment for the ticket price. That's actually pretty enlightening to see.
Oh, wow.
I can recommend that. And you can, and say like, feel free to put something funny as the reference. That's usually pretty good as well.
Yeah. To be fair, there are a few people like a guy named Lockie Reed and another one, Courtney Thompson, who definitely do read it because they're the ones you get questions from saying, what about in this situation, according to the player pack, this happens, but with this rules or interaction, this happens. And you go, I don't know, man. I copied and pasted most of it from some other guy's player pack. So I don't know.
Oh, I mean, hey, my first player's pack didn't have a timetable in it, so there we go.
Yeah. That's like the most important thing. That nobody reads a player pack.
The address
on the day. They want what mission are we playing and what time is lunch, and that's pretty much it.
That's true. One trick I worked out is if you have a projector in your room, just put the mission. I go to Wahapedia and be like, mission on the screen, because it's in there's like the lectern set up because I do it at uni. So it's like, boom, on the projector, Google Wahapedia mission, and it can put that up. Easy peasy. And then a timer off to the side as well.
100%. That's the plan for the next one is to do that, because people want to know how long they've got left and what the mission is at the very start. It's funny how many times you're like, I've got the player pack, everybody's got the mission, and then you hear people yelling, what mission is it? What are we doing? Is it 1-1, 3-2? I don't know.
I mean, that happens everywhere, right? It's always like you ask the TOs, and the TO's like, I don't know, I put it in the pack, and it's just suddenly like whoever gets there first on their phone then yells out, and it echoes around the room, and then you get the one guy who's over in the corner playing the wrong mission because they didn't hear. But
that's right.
Not only are they playing the wrong mission, they're playing the incursion mission version instead. Sometimes it's happened more than once. Where you go around the tables with like the objective markers like completely different. Like, what are you guys doing? It's like, I'm looking at the incursion number 11 instead of the strike version.
Actually, to be fair, I did that at one of our own events. I was playing a guy and. He hadn't arrived yet, so I was kind of setting up the table just with the objective markers. And the mission that goes like the objective markers go. There's 4 diagonally across, and then one about that way.
Data scry salvage, right?
That's the one. Yeah. But I think this is prior to. It was called something else.
Vital intelligence.
That's it. Yeah. Vital. But I, for some reason, set the diagonal up on the wrong diagonal, and I was looking at it going, oh man, I don't love the terrain set out like corner to corner here. You've got these objectives in the corners and they're right out in the open. And then Sean Sullivan went past and he looked at me and go, why have you set them up that way though? Like if you go that way, the terrain's awesome in those corners. Oh yeah, that's.
I can do you one better, Steve, right? Because I've designed all the terrain myself and I over-engineered everything. I then set up all the objectives and like plan deployments and stuff in CAD because I have the CAD models for it, and then make templates. So I know that terrain will be good. I was doing conversion, the one where it's got like the rotationally symmetric but not mirror. Yeah, I put them the wrong way. Like, so I had the flank that's like got them spread wider. I got that backwards and I'd set everything up. I'm like, this is great. And then I go to load in the model with the objectives. I'm like, why is this wrong? And I work out, there's like a moment of realization, and I'm just really sad because I have to redo my work.
Yeah. For that particular mission, I have gone into the actual mission book and written the measurements from the board edge for every single marker, because I just can't. It's too hard. It takes too long to set it up to start. If it's round 3 on day 1 or day 2, you're like, oh, this is taking too much of my brain. I haven't even started playing yet.
Yeah, like putting the objectives down is like an entire movement phase for knights, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, Sam. Over talking.
Yeah. Sam's busy here trying to like have us actually get on topic. Are you trying to move us on to Steve's wonderful podcast now, Sam? Is that what's coming next, or do you have something else in mind?
Sure. There's the segue. So go for it, Towse. So obviously there's the segue there. So you've hosted many podcasts and like participated, but you got a recent one coming up. So Champions of 40K. So tell us about it, Steve. And I know you've already announced who your first guest is.
Yeah. So first guest is a guy named Mitch Beard. And I tell this story in the podcast, but maybe I can just do it here anyway instead. The reason Mitch is guest number 1 on this, I had this podcast called 40K Game Changers, which went to air on the Frontline Gaming Network, which is, love them for that. The support is amazing. And Game Changers was literally about talking to people who really influence the way the game is played by us normal, mortal, everyday plebs. And it had some of the biggest names, right? So we had Duncan Rhodes, and we had Mike Brandt, and we had Lawrence Baker, and we had Rick Priestley, who created the game back in 84, 85. So we had these people on. And then at the same time, I started doing a little bit of co-hosting with the Art of War. So John Lennon and I were talking to people about different armies and things for their Art of War competitive podcast. And we talked to a guy named Mitch Beard, who runs the Sister Act podcast about sisters competitively. And while we were talking to Mitch, I was like, man, this dude is amazing. I'd just love to be able to do a podcast one day with Mitch, because he's such a good dude. Like, he's just such a likable guy, speaks really well. Be very cool to catch up and do something podcasty with him one day. And Game Changers finished, and I kind of looked and thought, I feel like I'm done with that. I've spoken to all the people I really personally wanted to kind of connect with and get to. Not that there aren't other game changers out there. I'm sure there are, but these were the names that I had on my list that I was like, I want to get to know them. So that was done. And I was kind of sitting around thinking, what can I do next? Oh, man. And then I remembered Mitch, and I thought, you know what I should do is talk to people who really go out of their way to champion a certain army faction, or a faction, a part of the world, or a cause, or whatever. So that's where Champions of 40K was born. It's about people who champion some aspect of the hobby for whatever the reason is. And because he was the one, he was kind of in my head when I was figuring it all out, he's guest number 1. And he's really, really, as I expected, really funny. Got some great stories about how his podcast started. And we're putting that as we speak. It's Sunday in New Zealand. So in 2 days, episode 1 will be out. I've got Liam Hackett from Australia.
Great guy. Yeah.
Great guy and literal champion, right? Like champion of the world. The guys from Poland from Contact Lost are going to be on the show. I've got some bigger names like John Lennon's going to be on the show. Got some great guys from Middle America who champion that part of the world. And various different people who are amazing within their factions, who kind of stick with them no matter what else is going on in the world. There are those people that continue to do well with a certain faction. So, there's a bunch of folks that I'm looking forward to speaking to.
Yeah, sounds awesome. And just to transition slightly and plug the whole network thing, Mitch Beard is also active in the Best in Tabletop Network Discord and the Sisters channel. Nuns with Attitude, I think, is the channel name. And so do the things, hit the buttons on YouTube and go to the Patreon page and buy merch from the store. Yada yada yada. I'm going to do a lazy plug. Sam can do more later. But no, I'd rather get back to talking with Steve.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So where can we listen to the show, Champions of 40K? So where will it be released?
That'll also be out on the Frontline Gaming Network. I also have a Facebook page and website. See, if I was a professional, I'd be able to remember the site, but I just changed it. So I think it's called stevejoll40k.com. But the Facebook page is Steve Joll's World of 40k. And that's where the game changes, this one, and I've got an idea for a different podcast that I want to do at a later date that'll all be available. So for me, I'm such a short attention span guy that the idea of doing a podcast, as lots of people do, and I just have so much admiration for it for years and years and years and years, that I just can't stay focused on a thing for that long. So I'm an ideas guy. Like, have you ever seen The Castle? The Australian movie The Castle? One of the greatest films of all time. But in that, Big Brother Steve is an ideas man, and that's me. I get these ideas and I go, cool, and then I stick with it for about a minute and a half. So I like to do these short run series of podcasts,
Yeah.
So that leave them wanting more,
Absolutely. That's a great summary. And we'll have links and stuff for your show and stuff in the description down below for you, Steve, and in the podcast. Awesome. If anyone listening can join. We had someone mention you should look into Morty and Glory. So he's a diehard guard player. Tim doesn't even like the army, but you should follow him because of how passionate he is. So
awesome. All right, that's great. Yeah, there are a bunch of people who really champion their armies, their factions, and I love that you, no matter what's happening in the meta, you just stick with your thing and you turn up, and often those people end up doing really well. Sean Hayden has switched now, but for the longest time he would take Eldar to everything and still was doing super well with a faction that other people found hard to make work in whatever the given meta was,
Wait, sorry, that's Sean Hayden, right?
Sean Naden, sorry, yes.
Yeah. I got really confused. I'm like, is this a Wellington guy I don't know of? Oh, no, Sean
Naden. What did I say? Hayden?
Yeah, Hayden.
I don't know why I said Hayden. But Sean Naden with his Eldar. And then as soon as they got like really, really, really good, he switched to something else. I feel like he's just a guy that likes a challenge. I'd love to get him on my show as well.
He's gone to Orcs because he is a pointy ear player and Orcs have pointy ears.
Right. Yes, that's right. He's gone to Orcs and again but also I feel like a couple of people have gone to Orcs recognizing that they are good into whatever's good at the moment. Orcs are suddenly Goths, particularly, seem to be doing pretty well, right?
Yeah.
Goth Rush, good stuff. And like in France recently, they had the team championship, but they're playing Death Skull. So there's in a team format of Death Skull, all obsec. So Orcs are on the rise.
Yeah.
The Green Tide.
Yeah. Sam, what do you play? What's your thing?
I'm a big bug player, so over the left shoulder, it'd be like all my Tyranids is my favorite army, but Towse is like I said, a filthy meta chaser. So I definitely chase the meta a little bit.
That was a weird way to pronounce bandwagoner, dude.
Yeah. Play a bit of everything. Right. But whatever's needed for the team. So I like to focus on teams. So whatever my local meta needs or the team needs, I'll play that. So eventually I'll collect basically everything except for Space Marines and Imperial Guard because just don't like those two. But eventually I'll
collect everything. Pro tip to everybody. Saying that you're just doing it for teams is a really, really solid excuse for bandwagoning. It'll definitely never fail you.
Yeah, that's right. Whatever the team needs me to play, as long as it's broken in the meta at the moment.
Yeah, for sure.
That's right.
I will gladly take the Nine Void Weavers. Oh, it's a shame, but I'll for the team.
You can spot the
Some
meta chasers.
Some of you may die, but it's a sacrifice I'm willing to make.
You can spot the bandwagoners and the meta chasers because they have currently got half of a Votan army painted, and it's going to sit on the shelf. They kind of bought the boxes, started painting them, and they went, "Wait, they've changed the rules already? Okay."
Damn, trade them in for that score credit. No, I wouldn't do that. I have more standards than a Votan player, so it's all right.
Right. The question though: Are Votan Xenos, or are they kind of Marines, or are they?
Technically, Xenos
has them. Yeah, Games Workshop has them listed under Xenos armies on their web store.
Yeah.
So Xenos, that's what I'm going to go off.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Easy.
Yeah.
Oh. So, Steve, as you mentioned, you're very open and very transparent about your hobby and obviously being a radio host. Have you ever had anyone call into your radio show talking about 40K or wanting to talk about Warhammer?
If they did, they wouldn't make it on air. That would just be a turn off for everybody else. No, like I'm very open about. I reference it quite often in the radio show, and have no problem with saying, that I play the game. And I think one of my big focuses was trying to normalize it as much as possible. Just kind of we in Wellington we have pretty good listenership. Like we rate pretty well. So at any given moment, there'll be enough people listening so that I can say I play Warhammer, and but it's one of those. It's pretty niche, right? Like we've all been in that situation where you've been at a party or talking to someone and it comes up somehow, or whatever they ask about the hobbies. You mention Warhammer, and it's just this weird kind of space where you have to explain what that is and how it works and why a 53-year-old man plays with dollies. And it's like,
Do you ever have the weird situations though, where like you mention it, and then someone's like, "Oh yeah, I remember that." Like, that happens as well, and that's really great. And suddenly it's like, "One of us, one." And you get like this weird corner of like everyone talking about this, and there's like the couple of girlfriends or something just be like, "Oh, what's going on? I don't."
Finding a unicorn in the wild. This is this happened we had our windows done, and the guy came to do the windows, and he saw the models in my house, and he was like, "Do you play 40K?" And I was like, "Holy sh! Hold on a second. Are you a human being that I've met outside of a tournament that plays 40K?" And so he knew all about it. And do you know what? We've kept in touch. He gave me a knight. He was building a knight, and doesn't have any other knights, and had no interest in using it, and kind of got halfway through it, had built it and undercoated it and magnetized all the weapons. And he said, "Oh, I've got a little something I want to drop off at your place. Will you be home?" And I came over, and he came over and he dropped off a blimmin' knight. And so how cool is that?
That is pretty cool. Tim does ask though, so obviously you're very transparent about 40K and your nerd hobbies, but would you ever tell someone about 40K on your first date? Just asking for a friend.
Tim, it's a long time since I had a first date. My wife, would I tell someone about it on a first date? Yeah, probably, actually.
Would you tell your wife that you told someone on your first date?
Yeah, so that's the other thing. Would I tell my wife I was going out on a first date? Probably that would be a mistake.
Well, Towse, for context, was very transparent on his first date with his recent partner, so good for him. It all worked out, so happy days.
Have you guys...
reference, Steve, as well, that was the free accommodation I had in Auckland, so it worked out okay then.
We're done. Yeah. Very quickly, can I tell you guys the Nick Nanavati story? Have you guys heard the Nanavati story about being the Tom Brady of 40K?
Oh, yeah. I've heard this story, but it's so good. Yes, please repeat this.
So I kept on hearing John Damaris introduce him as the Tom Brady of 40K. And so I got him on my Game Changers podcast and asked him, "What is this about?" And he said, "Well, I don't know if we're allowed to say, but okay, here goes." So he went out to a bar, met a girl, took her home. And they're back at his place, and because he's a professional 40K player, there's 40K models everywhere, and every other part of 40K, with the mats and objective markers and trophies and podcasting, TV setup, everything. It's all there, all around the house. And she's asking about, what it's all about, and he tells her it's to do with 40K. And she's like, "Oh my God, I have a friend who was into this." And so at 3:00 in the morning, she FaceTimes a guy that she knows and says, "I'm like, look at all this 40K stuff. I'm at this guy's house, and he's into Warhammer 40,000. And the guy says, "Oh, who is it?" And she says, "Oh, his name's Nick Nanavati." And the guy on the other end of the phone, with Nick standing right there, the guy on the other end of the phone goes, "Oh my God, Nick Nanavati, he's like the Tom Brady of 40K." And so from that moment on, he is the Tom Brady of 40K. And it's not an unfair description. Like he's right up there.
Yeah, because as soon as John Damaris heard that story, right, it was just he wouldn't let it go.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. Yeah. Well, would you? Like, if you, I feel like it's too good.
Imagine going on your first date, though, FaceTiming a friend at 3 a.m. and accidentally delegating yourself to third wheel so that your friend and your date can talk about soldiers.
And suddenly the friend and Nick are like FaceTiming. Yeah.
Funny. Yeah.
Too good. I heard about the story and knew the parameters around it, but I didn't know, like, it was at 3 a.m. There's a face. Oh, that's just too good.
Yeah,
Too
it's very
good.
funny. Very funny.
Oh,
You know what,
that's
Steve?
different.
Have you thought about trying to get Henry Cavill on for your 40k champions?
Oh, only every
Just
minute
as
of
a
every day. Yeah,
yeah.
he would have been.
Surely you've got this.
Well, I'm just hoping he listens, right? I'm just gonna maybe in every podcast I should say, by the way, Henry Cavill. But I know that
Yeah.
Mini Wargaming Dave also tried to get him on to their channel. Challenged him to a game, and I feel like if Mini Wargaming Dave can't get Henry Cavill, I'm
Yeah,
pretty
the
sure
reason
I
I
can't
say
get Henry
this
Cavill.
is I've opened YouTube to go reply to Tim, but apparently Sam addressed it, and I see that. Oh yeah, that's right. Squidmar has the thing of painting Henry Cavill's dream army, and
Oh
so he
yeah,
actually was on. Yeah, so there is hope. You got this, Steve. We believe in you.
I just saw the Squidmar thing the other day of painting Henry Cavill's army. It's amazing, right?
Yeah.
So,
Hmm.
yeah.
It'll be
But
almost to your standards.
The one guy I really wanted to get onto Game Changers but never quite could was Aaron Dembski Bowden. He's very, very, very hard man to get hold of, and I feel like if I can't get him, then Henry Cavill's probably slightly out of reach. But you never know. You don't ask, you don't get, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you never know. You never know. That's a great piece of advice. You never know. Like, reach out to people, and you never know they'll reach out. Like, they'll maybe respond back.
Yeah.
Always have a chance.
Yeah.
So, how important do you think it is? Like, so obviously yourself being quite open about your nerdy hobby, and like celebrities and people of a bigger figure to like display, like, be comfortable in their own skin about their nerdy hobbies. Do you think it's really good for the scene? And
yeah, I had this conversation with so many people with the Game Changers podcast that being nerdy these days is so mainstream. Like, Marvel movies are just, everybody's seen Marvel movies. DC's out there. There are enough celebrities that play D&D where it's just kind of so. And I know that's not quite Warhammer 40k level of nerddom, but
it's an adjacent hobby, though, right?
Yeah, but I grew up in the 80s. Like, my high schooling was in the 1980s, and being a nerd then or playing D&D was so. You've seen American movies about the nerds, and that's what it was
shove them in the locker, right?
Yeah, that's kind of So nerds were very much an outlier group of sort of, and actually, one of the best illustrations of it is the latest series of Stranger Things with the Dungeons and Dragons players. They all think of devil worshipping, and it wasn't quite on that level. But nerds were definitely an outlier. Whereas now I think it's fine. Like, there's an element of pride in being like, the more nerdy the better. It's screw you. I'm just going to own this as hard as possible. And that's a great way of bringing 40k in. If you talk of, I used to collect Superman comics or DC comics, and people are, if you want to have a nerd competition, you'd be like, yeah, I collect comics, and people are, I collect comics too. Like, oh, well, I play Warhammer 40,000. Okay, you win. It's it's kind of it's a bit of a badge of honor these days, I think. And definitely you've got to own it.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
absolutely.
Because the other thing, right, is high school can be brutal, right? Like, high schoolers can just be absolutely savage to each other, and so cruel. Like, you get out of it, and you start to realize, like, oh yeah, like, man, just sometimes you just need to, I guess, just own it or whatever, or go, yeah, I do this sort of thing and accept it, and you find like niches and things like that of people that you get on with, and
yeah, and it probably is. I say I did school in the 80s. It's probably the same now, where if you're at all self-conscious or worried about it or whatever, you probably don't own up to it as a teenager. But you know what? I'm a middle-aged man, so I don't care. Whatever you think of me is what you think of me. It's too late. It's too late for me to be worried about it now.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, personal story for me, like, that's why I got out of the hobby when I was in high school, like, because the Games Workshop was right next to my high school where I attended, and like after school, sometimes like people come by the high school, and like, if you're in there, get yelled, seen things about you, or bullied per se, like, that got me way out of it because I was just like petrified and just bullied for it and tormented. And even coming back into the hobby, I was scared like shitless of like what people would think, and like I wouldn't, like, just nervous, like what people would say. So it took a long time.
Yeah.
Like, people like yourself,
which is really hilarious. When after high school you went off to like college to play American football, right? So like as a linebacker or something, was it, Sam? I don't remember the position, but you were like the big dude that hits people hard, right? So the fact that this guy is worried about his nerdy hobby when he's like, nah, I'm going to stop during high school because I'm going to go and just like hit people for a scholarship, was it? I'm going to assume it was in the US. Yeah.
Did you play American football in the States?
I did, yes. Yes, I played Division II college football.
Wow.
Yeah,
He deserted rugby,
that's another
Steve,
story.
right? Like, how could he?
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's another
yeah.
story for another day for sure. We could definitely talk about it later.
I got my New York Giants T-shirt on under this. I'm a big fan of the American football.
Well, this would be
Yeah.
a long segment if we talk more. So
yeah. Anyway, but I do think the point is, if younger people, definitely, whatever you're into, you probably, if it's outside of that mainstream sport, blah blah blah, then it's harder to own it because you're just going through. It's difficult to step up and own what you enjoy unless it's what everybody else is doing, with a few personal exceptions. But there are, when you get a bit older, you can kind of you able to find similar people and go, okay, great, I've got a group now. We can all do it together.
Yeah,
absolutely. So obviously in your previous life, not previous life, but previously you helped host up 40K Vanilla, as it's collectively known, Art of War 40K Vanilla. What were some of your lessons and stuff you learned during that podcast? Like, what were some of your greatest insights as a player, listening to other very good players?
That's a tough question. Insights as a player. So one of the main reasons I loved hosting the show was just because every day you're learning so much. I am not a smart guy. Like, I'm not a mathematical brain. So when you're playing across the table from someone else who, like when I spoke to Brandon Grant, and that guy can look at any given situation, look at the mission, look at the objectives, look at the army you've got and what you've brought and what the points are, and in his mind, he can see the end of turn 5. And it's just a matter of making sure it gets there. And for me, I'm much more of a reactive player. So I just like learning techniques and abilities to get through games, learning how to be patient with things, learning when to go and when not to go. It's as much experience on the table, like just getting reps in with. And I feel like you can shortcut that a little bit by speaking to people who've already got the reps, already know how things are going to work out or whatever. So listen, I really love listening to competitive-based podcasts with players who are really good and able to, and almost every time you're able to go, oh man, that's a great idea. I need to remember that or do that or look at that little element of it. There are some people who are just really great at explaining stuff. Very often with the Art of War Vanilla podcast, in the second episode, I quite often found that got into like too much detail for me to kind of go with a specific army, right? If you're talking about guard, I don't play guard. In the first episode, there are more general principles of play that I can attach myself to, but then you go into the real in-depth, here's how to minutely work the guard army. I'd be like, okay, cool. I don't really understand. But yeah, for someone like me who is not automatically mathematically able to figure out what the odds are, even like almost always there'll be a point in a game where I go, is it better to mean that you can only wound me on a 4-up or give myself a 4-up invul? Which of those mathematically is going to work out better? And every single time I go, I don't know. Like I can't, it's too many numbers. I can't figure it out. So I just go, well, I'll do what feels like it's going to be harder for you to get through. And that's it.
I as an alternative to that point, rather than me going into the maths of like which is better of those two, which is where my brain first went to, I am what were you able to pass on to the Art of War podcast about improving their audio recording professionalism, that side of things, given that you are a radio host for your day job?
Yeah, that's how that's how I kind of got into it. And full credit to John Damaris. When I reached out, he came back. A lot of people you reach out to and say, hey, if you want, I can help. And they mostly ignore you. And then John rang me straight away and said, Nick's just passed this message on. Man, I am keen. So my job on the radio is I'm the anchor of the show, right? And there are different, you'll hear in any given podcast or situation, you have the anchor, you have the personality, you have the whatever different roles in the show. So I reached out.
Tangent guy.
Tangent man Towse. Yeah. So I reached out to John and said, listen, my job is as an anchor. I've done coaching in this area before. Your job is as the anchor of that show. If you want, I can help you out. And he said yes. So And there are lots of little things, being the anchor where it's just owning the start of the show, giving people confidence that they're at the right place, letting people know what they're in for the rest of the show. All of these different things that you are able to, as the anchor, literally, you're the anchor. You're the thing holding it down. So if you've got Towse the Tangent Man going nuts on a tangent, what the audience needs to know is the anchor's got this. The anchor is the guy that will bring it back. Don't worry about it. Everything's under control because he's in charge. He's got it. And I've had similar conversations with other podcasts. I don't want to name any names, but we've probably 2 or 3 other podcasts that I've spoken to just about the importance of having those roles, being able to tease effectively, let people know what's coming up, get people to go through to the next thing if there's a paywall that they've got to get through to the other side of. I've had 30 years of learning this stuff, so being able to pass on, and that's a lot of accumulated information and knowledge, right? So there's little things you can kind of start with, and then if people want to go further, you can kind of get into the more. And we still have every single day sessions with our coaches and bosses and whoever on how to improve what we just did. So that was the starting point of it, just helping John with the anchoring role of that show. And then Nick gets to do whatever he wanted to do and be the expert and talk about everything. And then the guest can just kind of respond to the questions. As long as we as the audience know John's the anchor, he's moving us to the next thing. He's got this, don't worry.
If Sam the anchor can permit it, I have another question I think might be funny. Have you noticed anything just with our recording that we've either done well or poorly on? To put you on the spot a bit, Steve. If you haven't, that's pretty fair.
You guys are amazing. No. Well, look, I haven't been doing this with any kind of analytical mind. I haven't been. I'm just the guest here, right? I haven't been sitting here as the guest thinking, well, they did that wrong or they did that right. So the short answer is probably, but look, that's not what we're here for. And also, it's a Warhammer podcast. The other thing people need to understand with this stuff is, you're not putting on a radio show. So there are lots of big differences between a radio show and a podcast. And people are tuning in because they like you guys and they want to hear what you have to say about the game, or they want to hear what the guest has to say. In this case, probably not so much.
I know. I think it's definitely that one in this case. At least that's what it should be.
Well, I don't know. But yeah, like every show always has things they can improve. Man, I feel like I'm getting too defensive now. I'll just shut up.
No, absolutely not. No,
I put you on the spot. That's fine. I just thought it might be funny, but it's pretty fair that if you're just like here to have a chat, that you didn't notice that sort of thing.
Right.
Yeah.
I probably make you paranoid now, though.
I was going to say that if you want to listen to more Steve, I know you've talked about on Canhammer actually a couple of times of explaining how to improve your audio quality and talking through things. So Tim talks about how best way to present 40K. So your previous podcast has been really good at talking about the game of 40K and like analyzing things. I know the sentiment of trying to paint a picture for the listeners is always very, very helpful, and like a little snippet that you gave out. So always appreciate your tips to Steve and all the stuff you've done over time.
Big thank you to Tim. Those are very kind words. Thanks, mate. I appreciate that. And thank you, Sam.
All right. So, Steve, is there any final shout-outs or plugs you want to have, or any events that maybe people can catch you at on the horizon?
We've already mentioned the one that we've got coming up. I know Alex is there one in Christchurch as well in the not-too-distant future? Or
next weekend there's the South Island Masters, but like lists are in for that sort of thing and stuff. So that'll be... if anyone's listening to this and you somehow want to make it along, good luck. I don't think that's happening.
Well,
I'm pretty sure you're well booked out for your event, right?
We've got although that being said, that there are a couple of people have just dropped in the last few days. We had a waiting list of 8, which is down to I think 2 now. So, but we had 42. We've got 42 coming. I fully expect that we'll be sitting around 40 by the time dice start being rolled, which is all good. 40's great. That's a good number of people to have. So that's on the 10th and 11th of December that's happening. So the shout out that I really would love the chance to do is to Mithras Games in New Zealand. They do gaming mats. It's amazing to have them doing mats, and they also do dice, which you can buy on their website. But the guys at Mithras have been the most amazingly supportive people when it comes to putting on tournaments. They just send us stuff to give away at the events as spot prizes. Kapiti Hobbies have also come on board to help. We've also got Battle Kiwi. They've given us some prizes. But really, Mithras have really just thrown stuff at us and said, any support we need, they're here for us. So they've been amazing with those dice. You got those at the Not Masters, didn't you, Alex?
Yep. Yeah, I'm still using them. Yeah,
that's right.
I got asked the other day.
Spot prize as well as winning the event. You won a spot prize of dice.
Yeah.
I know
you seem quite upset at the time.
Not at all. I'm like, we were grateful that you came up from Christchurch to our event, and I like, as much as we give people a hard time, you played well, you earned the win. There's absolutely no hard feelings about someone coming to an event and winning and then taking the trophy all the way back down to the South Island and us never seeing it again. Over to Australia is another thing, though. Adam, not on from the Kraken event. I know. Adam Camilleri comes to New Zealand, wins the Kraken event, and shoots away before he can even get hold of the trophy. To his credit, he left the trophy because he wanted to help support the guys so they could use it the next year. Yeah, you cannot say a bad word about Adam Camilleri. He's a legend and as nice as everybody says, and the first person to support a thing if you do it. He's great.
Absolutely. All on those kind words, that's going to be us for today. But there you go. Thank you for your time, Steve. Really, really appreciate it. And some great advice and tips along the way, and highlighting Wellington 40K. So thank you very much for your time. And catch him on Champions of 40K coming up in the next couple of days with Mitch Beard. Thank you for having me on, guys. I really appreciate it. Thank you for taking the time with me.
No.